What is good, everybody? Juliana Page here, and I have a word for you. As you can see from the title of this message, here's the thing. Say this for yourself, I can't be the solution and pollution at the same time. Dude, that's not only a catchy phrase, just catch it. I can't be the solution and pollution at the same time. Now, for those of you that know, for those of you that might not know, I am somebody who is passionate about self-mastery, not for self-helping your way through life, not for my ego, but really because I'm passionate about breaking generational curses. I'm passionate about some things stopping with me so that new things can form. I'm passionate about purpose and my assignment and a new legacy, particularly a legacy of faith. I'm passionate about stewarding something very different than I was given. So I am very relentless about how I feed my mind, about how I express myself, about how I communicate, about how I learn and I grow and I develop, how I manage relationships, how I steward what I've been given. It's really, really important to be self-aware, to be self-reflective, not condemning, not shaming, but to do that deep inner soul work on the daily, on the reg, as they say, because nobody else can do that for you. And nobody else deserves all of this stuff that we project on them because we don't do our own soul work. That's a hot freaking mess. So I came from a mess. So to some degree, I have a lot more passion to not just project my mess onto everybody else. I have a lot of accountability in that way. And I'm called to really steward out new mentorship as far as that's concerned as well. So self-mastery, not only actualizing the potential that's within, but also being very aware of weaknesses so that similar patterns that you've been exposed to, that you've been cultivated in, that you were raised in, right, don't continue. Okay, so constantly challenging my perspectives or my mindsets or my beliefs or the way I handled situations, being aware of that and the impact that that has on other people. So with that, take that now and say this saying again. I can't be the solution and pollution at the same time. So think about it as another way. Am I a solution or am I adding pollution? Like, what ingredients am I putting into, I'm talking relationships today. So what ingredients am I putting into relationships? But it starts with you. So you want to think too, what ingredients am I putting into myself? How is my relationship? I would say it like this. This is the lead in. How is my relationship with God? Right? Because God's the author of love. God's the creator of you. So God knows you. How is my relationship with God? How is my relationship with myself? And then this can relate to how is my relationship with other people? Okay? So with that, I really wanted to talk on the subject specifically of the covenant of marriage. Now, not everybody is called to that, but I want to talk about it because I know that I wasn't exposed to a lot of the knowledge that I have now about relationships. It's something that I've studied a really long time because I believe that Disney sold me a lie. And I didn't see good examples. So where was that going to come from? And it was terrifying for me to think about being in a relationship if I didn't have the tools or if I wasn't ready, because what would I pass on then? A hot freaking mess, right? So there is nothing, this is what I know, there is nothing like a relationship that has the power to affect your heart, okay? And if there's anything the enemy of your soul wants to mess up, it is your heart. Oh my goodness, because that can totally derail your life. That's why it says guard your heart. Guard your heart. We're not really taught how to do that. So hopefully these tools will help you to do that, okay? So I want to give you a couple of questions. I wrote some of these down. I want to give you a couple of questions to think about. Am I ready for marriage? Am I really called to marriage? These are just really good self-check questions, okay? Because a relationship, for the record, is designed to fix problems, okay? Because two heads are better than one, right? Iron sharpens iron. So they're designed to fix problems together. They are not designed to create problems and to kill each other. Okay, so just context there. Question number 1. Are you mature enough to be corrected by a flawed person? Are you mature enough to be corrected by a flawed person? Here's the thing. I can speak to this. I know that this is something that I've absolutely had to die to, but when I've been hurt and it's been something that I just never had closure on, or I couldn't wrap my mind around, I don't understand why that occurred that way. Continuing to be in a relationship with somebody that hurt you, particularly in marriage, is going to happen, right? This person has the power to build you up. They also have the power to tear you down. And it's not all intentional, right? But what I've done and what we can do is we can keep this just list, this record of wrong. Well, you did this. And usually what happens is we bring that sucker out the next time something happens that hurts or offends us, right? That triggers us in some kind of way. We bring out that whole list. Well, you said, well, you did, or because you did this, we have this whole thing. So are you mature enough to be corrected by a flawed person? Think about that. For a man, are you mature enough to let your wife, your helpmate, speak correction, right? Healthy confrontation. Are you mature enough to be corrected by her even though she's not perfect? For a woman, are you mature enough to be corrected by your husband, by this man, this partner that you're in a relationship? Are you mature enough to be corrected even though you know his weaknesses, you know his flaws? Can you still honor him? Can you still respect him? Huge, huge. Oh my goodness, that's a huge one. Okay, next. Will you surrender that record of wrongs? Will you surrender it? That's, like I said, a really big thing. It is so easy to keep that sucker handy. But what that does is it just infuses distrust. It infuses fear. It literally sucks the life out of the relationship because both parties don't feel comfortable communicating and expressing themselves, so they just don't anymore. It's a mess. Yeah. So will you surrender your record of wrongs? You don't want God looking at you that way. You don't want God to keep this constant record of wrongs. Will you be merciful? Will you be forgiving? Will you be humble? Will you choose love? Big deal. And lastly, before I get into the real work, can you discern a bad day from a bad heart? So wisdom and discernment often work together on this one, but can you discern a bad day from a bad heart? Let me clarify. I know as a woman, emotions at times can be cray. Okay? Like we can feel, we can absorb, especially if you're, as the world says, an empath, you can be very sensitive to things that are happening. That can build up. And all it takes is the wrong tone, the wrong response. Somebody didn't take your call in the moment you needed them to pick up the phone, like whatever it is. All it takes is just a little trigger, to be real, to set off a whole fuse of emotions. Okay? Now, when we react in emotion, this can be men too, by the way. When we react in emotion, whether it's anger, whether it's frustration, whether it's overwhelm, whatever it is, we're not thinking clearly. We're not using wisdom. We're not using discernment. So we could say things that we can't take back. We could react and just cut things off completely when we're misinterpreting what's happening. We create this whole scenario in our head because we weren't able to calm down and tune into discernment. We just turned the volume of our emotion up and totally derailed the situation and probably caused a lot of damage. So can you discern a bad day from a bad heart? Because if you can, you'll extend grace, right? You don't need to talk about something when you know somebody's had a bad day. That's probably not the time or the place to dive into a big thing that you want to talk about. Or you can really step in and offer some encouragement or support, and that conversation can come out naturally at another time. If you can discern that, you will literally not add fuel to the fire, but you'll just dump some water on it. So I wanted to share that because what somebody hasn't told me, but what I know now is that relationship, particularly marriage is a ministry, right? So it's something that's an assignment that you're called to for sure, but it's a dying of yourself daily. Like it's a commitment to death pretty much. And that sounds bad, but it's true. Like it's a death to your fleshly self, this human nature, this need to control, this need to have your partner meet insecurities in you, this need to be right or have your preferences all the time, a lot of things, right? This is a dying to that. As you can see, those 3 questions are examples of how you die to yourself rather than not allowing somebody to have healthy confrontation with you to grow through something or to tell you how you're impacting them and how you're influencing them, because we can't always see our blind spots. So rather than getting offended, right, are you mature enough to die, right, to that feedback, to that needing to be perfect, to that needing to constantly be holier than thou or whatever that is, right? Are you willing to let your ego die to take the feedback and improve, right? Or are you willing to surrender this record of wrongs? Are you going to create space for this person to evolve? Or are you more committed to seeing how wrong they are or to the vision that God gave you of who they are and what your words can literally speak life to? Whew, that's a big one. All right. And can you discern a bad day, right, from a bad heart? Because if you can, then maybe you can release your needs being met in that moment to be there for your partner. There's going to be times where your partner steps up for you, and sometimes you step up for your partner. Can you discern that? Can you work together in that way? So think about this, okay? Marriage, again, is a constant dying, okay? So a lot of people think that it's, just pleasure, having a partner in crime, or ride or die, the best sex ever, somebody that's just a constant companion, right? Like we see some of these surface things, somebody to take all these fun pictures with on the internet. We see surface things, but we don't often realize what the actual work is behind the scenes. And it's a huge disservice to go off a snapshot and not show you the development and not have people speaking about what it actually entails. You shouldn't be in the marriage trying to get through the marriage. You should know these things before, in my opinion. Okay, so here are 5 things that are going to be going down on the reg if you want a healthy, mature relationship where you have 2 whole people, right, that are submitted to God, running after destiny together. Okay, number 1, I've alluded to this, hopefully you got it. It's denying the flesh. It's dying to yourself daily. Now, that hopefully is a practice that in your singledom, in your singleness, that you do already. Because in your singleness, that's supposed to be a time in a season where you're devoted to God, where God is developing you, your character, renewing your mind, creating a right spirit in you, creating in you a pure heart, right? Teaching you what it's like to know God for yourself, how to hear God, how to develop your faith, how to obey his voice, how to understand how he communicates to you and how he flows through you, where you're gifted at, what he's called you to. That's a lot of work, okay? And so it's really important that you know that before you partner up. I'm just saying, because a lot of times, if you don't, we usually point at other people or blame for what we didn't invest in upfront. Okay, so number 1 is denying the flesh. This is something you want to get in the habit of doing. This is looking like bridling your tongue. This is looking like taking thoughts captive that aren't in alignment with the truth. Literally, I say this, you can't afford to have a thought in your mind that God doesn't think about you. We have lots of thoughts in our mind daily that God doesn't think about us. We think about them not only about ourselves, but about other people. That's getting that in check. And it's also communicating and expressing yourself. So, for example, rather than being a negative Nancy all the time, you actually read the truth. You believe it like you believe that what God says is true, and you declare it over your life. You speak life. So rather than complaining about a situation, rather than phoning a friend and just venting about something, you check yourself before you wreck yourself, okay? So this is about denying the flesh. And when you get really good at doing that, then you're absolutely an asset to your partner also. Because doing it for yourself, when you get in a relationship, You're going to be doing it a whole lot more. You're just not alone now. Okay. Number 2, good lead in, is effort. Number 2 is effort. You do not want to be connected with somebody that has no work ethic. I am just saying, right? Life is hard enough as it is. If you're connected with somebody with no work ethic, it feels like you're just pulling them. And relationships aren't meant to be like that. It's meant to be like you're both running together in step, not one person way out ahead or the other one behind or slowing down. You're in step together. Okay. So this is a full-time job. There's no days off. It's constant training. You run this race together. Okay. Next one is anointing. And this is really important because we don't solve problems in our own strength, not by might nor by power, but by the Spirit, saith the Lord, right? So we do not overcome by yelling and screaming and proving our point. We don't do that. A lot of the work is actually in the prayer closet, behind the scenes, interceding for your partner, getting God's vision, God's download for what that is, praying against different things, and then showing up and walking in the truth that God has revealed to you and obeying God's voice. That anointing breaks the yoke. Okay, so you want that flowing in the relationship for sure. So not counting on your own power or strength to make it through, because you can't. It's supernatural. All right, number 4 is teachable and teamwork. You want to be teachable. You want to know that you're not perfect, that you have flaws, that you're not always going to get it right. And somebody that loves you actually calls you out on your stuff in love. There's healthy confrontation, and it's reciprocal. They keep you accountable to your strengths and what you're called to, but there's also healthy confrontation for the wholeness of the relationship and for the stewardship of that relationship. Okay. It also builds trust when you have those things. So if you can be teachable, you can receive feedback and you can integrate new knowledge into how you move forward. Also, if there's teamwork, then you feel okay communicating and expressing yourself. Then you feel like you can give feedback and receive feedback. You guys are both submitted to God. So there's a lot of confidence that's built when you know that you're submitted to God and when you know your partner's submitted to God. And together, you can pray God's will into your relationship and to what you're after. Huge deal. But that's not going to happen if you aren't teachable and if there's no teamwork. And then number 5 is really hearing what's happening, particularly when a partner is expressing him or herself. So this is really important because a lot of times we listen to reply, right? Or to correct, but we're not listening to understand. And a lot could be solved if you would just be still and just listen. Listen to hear and to understand. And this will radically shift the course of that relationship. So I wanted to hold that up because sometimes we get into relationships for projects. Sometimes we get into relationships to prevent loneliness. Sometimes we get into relationships for security or provision. Sometimes we get into relationships because we feel like we're missing something if we're not in one. And these are all fear-based, if you can really hear that. It's not faith-based. It's not wholeness. It's not spirit-led. And that can be really, really messy. And the goal of marriage is not to get divorced, right? And particularly when there's kids involved, it can be way, way different. And what the enemy loves is he loves assassinating the next generation, really, right? He doesn't like covenant. He wants to break that. If you are called to break something for God's glory, right? To have a new legacy, for example, or to break dysfunction or to break divorce or to break trauma or to break addictions. If you're called to break something, the enemy wants to break you. Okay. And so a lot of times partners are brought together to break something together that they couldn't do apart. So they're not fighting each other, right? A relationship isn't designed to create problems. It's designed to fix them. Together, you can have a greater impact. But a lot of times we let the wrong things lead. We let emotions lead. We let our cultural logic lead. We let our preferences lead. We let our desires lead. And it takes pain. And it takes trauma. And it takes a lot of cyclical seasons to finally have enough. And hopefully you get to that point. But it doesn't have to take that. You know, a lot of people don't tell us. You hear something like abstain from sex before marriage, right? But you don't hear how destructive to your soul it is and how hard it is to break a soul tie, right? How destructive it is to be in a relationship with the wrong person and how difficult it is to actually get deliverance from a soul tie. Nobody talks about that, right? And there's not people that are really courageous enough to have some conversations like this. You don't hear about it a lot. A lot of people can be swayed by opinions of man and by preferences of other people or by their own desires or by their own lack of self-control and self-discipline. So this is a reminder and encouragement. You can't be a solution and the pollution at the same time. So self-mastery in this case would be looking at yourself. Are you truly ready for the covenant of marriage? Are you called to that? Where are you bringing pollution into your life? And how can you partner with God so that He can evict some of those things from your life? Because God is the only fixer. No other human can do that, right? It's you partnered with God that does that. It's God that changes your mind. It's God that changes your heart. It's God that does a work in your soul and gives you this peace that surpasses all understanding so that you can be fit for His use, okay? So, and you want a partner that can work with you on that, right? A partner that can remind you of where to run, where your help comes from, a partner that can pray with you, a partner that can see who Christ is in you, right? A partner who can stand with you and isn't afraid of emotion and all of that as well. So, partner that can chase destiny with you. My encouragement really is to just think about this before you want to forsake a single season. It's actually very intentional. God is an intentional God. He's always on time. He hasn't forgotten. He knows the desires of your heart. He put them there. He has a perfect plan to get you where He wants you, where He's called you to. But will you lean in and do the work with Him? Even if that means being in a season that's uncomfortable for you. Even if that means waiting longer to be married than other people. Even if that means doing the work of dying to yourself so you can be an asset and whole when you meet your partner, rather than looking for someone to complete you, right? So that's my encouragement. Don't forsake the single season, even though it's uncomfortable. And before you are quick to point at another person as the source of all your problems, and if they would just change, then your life would be better, consider all of these things that I just shared with you. Are you willing and mature enough to be corrected by a flawed person? Will you surrender your record of wrongs? Can you discern a bad day from a bad heart? And are you really committed to these things? Denying the flesh, putting in effort, leaning on the anointing, being teachable and committed to teamwork, and also hearing to listen? Or are you trying to prove or push a different agenda? Really, really good stuff here. I hope this has blessed you. And one last thing, I would say, a great place to start, if you don't know where to start, if some of this is bringing up some stuff for you, is getting back to going to the advocate. God is your advocate, and He's your best friend, and He's your coach. Now, partner with God to become your own advocate, to have faith, to listen for God's voice, to obey God's voice, to let Him develop you so that you can be an asset to everyone that you encounter. Okay? All right, guys, I hope this blessed you. I would love some feedback. If you want to connect and follow me, you can follow me at Miss Juliana Page on IG, on the Instagram. You can follow me on Facebook as well. And I have all sorts of self-mastery tools, courses, and consulting work that I do that you can find out about over at julianapage.com. And if you want to also develop your relationship with God, I get it. There's a couple of great books over on julianapage.com as well, all under the main heading, God's Vibes Matter. So take a look and enjoy. Until next time, guys, stay blessed. Bye.